For 25 long years, Resident Evil has both plagued and thrilled the minds of gamers and average citizens alike. Though, however, such an ongoing series is bound to have its ups and downs from time to time. After one of its biggest blunders back in 2012 with Resident Evil 6 and Operation Raccoon City, Capcom decided to wise up and revive the elements from its earlier games from this franchise that made it so great. The magnanimous results of the past 5 or so years were the recent entries of Resident Evil 7 Biohazard and Resident Evil 8 Village. With Village being the topic of today's video. What is up, y'all? Primal here, and I invite you all to come and join me as I rank all of the bosses from Resident Evil Village from worst to best. After successfully reviving its survival horror roots with RE7 back in 2017, Capcom felt that in order to keep its winning streak going, they needed to go back and modernize the elements of one of its best-selling titles, Resident Evil 4. The result is Resident Evil Village, this beautiful new IP on its 25th anniversary. Not only does it perfectly revive the action elements that Resident Evil 4 introduced, but it also succeeds where Resident Evil 6 failed, by tying in all of the other elements of Resident Evil that made it, well, Resident Evil. And of course, when you tie in such action with a genre such as survival horror, you're bound to get some awesome boss fights, which of course are the stars of today's video. Given how in-depth I go with some of these entries, I'm going to be dividing this video into two parts. The first half will contain the first 7, the other half will contain, well, the other 7, because I was able to total up to 14 bosses for this video. I will be ranking them based on several factors from my personal experience, such as how well their design is to me and how much they entertained me. So with that said, let's jump right in. Number 14.
I've been waiting for so long. I'd make a much better daughter than Rose. Please, won't you stay with me forever?
Donna Beneviento and Angie. Donna Beneviento is the most mysterious of the 4 lords of the village, and the second one you'll encounter. She is also, surprisingly enough, the most human out of all of them, but she's still far from normal. She lives in a big, creepy old house in the Valley of Mist on the farthest reaches of the village. In fact, her house was the part I was looking forward to the most when this game was coming out. And I can definitely say for the most part they delivered with it. It was like Capcom's own version of Silent Hills. So after exploring the bells and everywhere else in this haunted house and doing some puzzles, you finally have a personal meeting with Donna, who wants to play a game of hide and seek with you and her doll Angie. You have to find Angie in 3 different locations of the house before her doll friends come to life and murder you. The fight becomes pretty overly simplistic and easy once you know where to look, especially since all of her locations are fixed and you'll know where to look the second time you go around. But that's one of the main reasons why I have her at the bottom of this list. Well, that and because of how it subverted our expectations very poorly. I mean, it's not even a real fight, to be honest, and there's not really much to it at all. Plus, we hardly get to see or know too much about them. But what we do know, however, it makes for one of the most interesting backstories yet. According to Donna's lore, when she was a little girl, she had a very tough time being around other people due to her slightly disfigured face. So her dad made her Angie, her favorite doll, to help her and keep her company. After both of her parents passing, Donna was left in the care of her family's gardener, until she was adopted by Mother Miranda. Once in her care, Mother Miranda started experimenting on Donna, infecting her with Cato and Mutamycete like the other children who became lords like her. This degraded Donna's mental health even further, to the point where she started experimenting with her newfound powers on other people. She can infect various plants with the Mutamycete, and the pollen they give off can induce hallucinations to those who are unlucky enough to inhale it. She has also infected the dolls she built with her Cato parasite in order to control them and do her bidding. But despite what she's grown into, she's still just a scared little girl with both physical and mental scars. Hence why she wears a mourning garb to hide her face. Though there are still some mysteries about her I'd like answers to. Like, did she really bring Angie to life using the Cato? Or is everyone just tripping high on shrooms? And to be completely honest, I still wish we actually got a real fight like what was shown on the map for Resident Evil 8 in her area.
Killed her. It's over. So, she's gone. We'll make things right.
Number 13. Soldat Jets. Yes, I am fully aware that these guys are treated like regular enemies, but you only encounter them like once in the entire game, so that's why they're on this list. The Soldat Jets are like their common Zwei and Eins brothers. The only big difference is, well, jet mobility. They're equipped with drill arms to mess you up if they get in too close, as well as catto-reactor weak points that they are fully aware of. Of course, the common mechanic with the Soldats remains with them because you have to wait until they attack because they're constantly guarding their weak points. Well, that's quite tedious to do here, especially since they can close the gap within seconds and the area you have to run around is very, very narrow. Plus there's 2 of them at once, so double the trouble. Plus it always takes quite a bit to stagger them to prevent them from actually attacking you. It seems the most fair way to fight them is to stress out their nav mesh. Lure them into the tunnel past the gated door. If you need to climb up the ladder onto the catwalk. That way you're able to safely exploit their openings while taking little to no damage at all. I can say they're definitely the most complex of the Soldat enemies you encounter throughout Heisenberg's factory, something they should definitely get points for. So given the fact that you fight them in a regular hall where you can barely do anything against them, it makes the experience of taking them on somewhat detrimented. What I'm looking for with these guys is something a bit more fair, as well as an interesting mechanic. And aside from the boss fight right before Heisenberg, there's only one other Soldat unit that I can think of that matches those parameters, and that you only encounter once as well, of course. Entry number 12, Soldat Panzer. A bit more in line with the other 2 regular Soldat enemies, Eins and Zwei, but it still has a very interesting mechanic that you have to use in order to defeat it. Its body is fully armored with no exposure to the weak point whatsoever, so you'll have to use some heavy-duty explosives to remove that armor. Once you do that, it's just business as usual. Attack the weak point to defeat them. But I think you can get a little bit more creative with how you defeat it, given how its body is not restricted to only attacking that one weak point. Yes, you encounter it in yet another regular hall area, but there's a lot more room to run around to take it on. The Soldats are indeed one of the most creative monsters in the entire Resident Evil franchise. But given how specifically these 2 are treated like regular enemies, you can't really think much of them afterwards. Number 11. Armored Lichen. The Armored Lichen is, well, you guessed it, an armored version of the basic Lichen enemy. They appear very scarcely throughout the game and take quite a bit of ammunition to bring down. The first and most memorable encounter takes place right in the central district of the village. Their most vulnerable areas are, well, wherever they're not armored. Well, a fat lot of good that does, because they seem to take out the same amount of damage throughout wherever. And you'd think that such a new powerful enemy would quit screwing around instead of just walking towards you menacingly. I mean, I kid you guys not, this guy has the pace of a glacier. But he does flinch quite a bit every time you hit him, especially with more powerful weapons. Plus there's plenty of room to run around, so there's not really much to worry about with him. Just make sure you don't accidentally get yourself cornered and you'll be fine. I'll admit, the Lichens are indeed one of my new favorite enemies throughout the entire franchise. But let me ask you this, developer. Is sacrificing the speed they're known for really worth it? Number 10. The Cannibals. The Cannibals are, well, I don't really know myself, to be honest. Aside from giant Scarface looking dudes with axes, one acts as a major secret boss in Otto's Mill, a place where you get a certain piece of treasure, as well as a whole bunch of animal meat for you to cook with the Duke. The other one you encounter at Claudia Beneviento's gravestone, as a secret mini-boss for her treasure. There really isn't a whole lot to the moveset aside from giant overhead or side swings, but I can definitely tell you that you do not want to take a direct hit from them head on. Fortunately, the places you fight them in are designed for you to easily keep your distance, but they're probably the enemy type that takes the most ammo to take down. Make sure you go in fully stocked with plenty of ammo before taking them on. and have a good plan and be sure to use whatever is in the environment that you can against them. Aside from being a bald, axe-wielding reskin of another boss we'll get to probably next video, I can't really say a whole lot of special stuff about them, to be honest. So I'll just let the rest of this play out for y'all. Number 9. The Varkalak Werewolves. Okay, yes, technically the base Lichen enemies are werewolves, but this is what they become when the mutation fully takes over. Full moon rules don't apply here, no magic involved, just a pathogen. Okay, I'll be honest, these are the kinds of werewolves I was thinking I'd see when this game was first coming out. Yeah, the base Lichens are cool and all, but they're too human in their design and way too intelligent from what I was expecting. When you first encounter these oversized scragamuffins, you're in for quite a treat because they decide to reenact that one scene from The Revenant with you. They're fast, they're agile, they're vicious, and they can go pretty much anywhere that they feel they can. But they're also very fragile, in a sense. If you have powerful enough weaponry, it's very easy to stagger them and take them down with only a few hits. The first couple of encounters with them set you up to get some pretty powerful guns that pack quite a punch to use against them. These would be the grenade launcher and the magnum. If you're fast enough and careful with your navigation, you can easily do the route to get the weapon to use it on them. Otherwise, you can either put up with what you have or get the heck out of Dodge. There's 5 in total throughout the whole game. 2 of them show up as a duo when you play as Chris. But I think the very first encounter and the one with the Alpha in the fields are the most meaningful out of the 5. Or 4. The Alpha Varkalak is much beefier to take down. But it should be a nice cakewalk if you've been stockpiling Magnum ammo up to this point. You get the Wolfsbane. That's the name of the gun, for those who don't know. The other 2, which are the first ones you ever encounter inside Moreau's reservoir, you'll have to rely on what supplies and wits you have. But they should be very manageable regardless, because the first one you can just hide in the house and take pot shots as he tries to get in there and get you, but you really can't. The second one, well, you'll pick up the Magnum before encountering it, so just blast away. And the final 2 that you encounter is Chris, will just unload and they're done. You just keep firing and they won't even get a chance to claw ya. I guess with what remaining time we have, I'll discuss the origins of the Lichens. Of course, they were the normal villagers of the village once, until Mother Miranda created a parasite called Cadeau from Neonomycete and implanted it in them to control them. Moreau added wolf's blood to the Cadeau, and when they were implanted in the villagers, they became, well, what you see here, until they continued to evolve into different shapes and sizes. And of course, the full adult version is the Varkalak, which is Romanian for werewolf. Number 8. Bella, Cassandra, and Danielle, the daughters of Demetisk. Okay, that's still not easy to pronounce. Bella, Cassandra, and Danielle are the 3 vampire daughters of Lady Alcina Dimitrescu. After death, Lady Dimitrescu brought them back to life using a species of fly that spawned from the Cado parasite. After their bodies were devoured, the 3 girls were reborn and reincarnated through them. Though the question still remains whether or not they are Lady Dimitrescu's real daughters, or if they were girls who she reincarnated her daughters through, or if she just decided to adopt them and turn them into vampires. Given the fact that they're no longer real humans and just apparitions of bugs, they're pretty much invulnerable to every single one of your attacks. But they do disperse every time you shoot at them in order to get a clear opening to run. Their one real weakness, however, happens to be the colder temperatures from outside. The bugs they're made of will petrify and die if exposed to anything less than room temperature. When that happens, the daughters become fragile and vulnerable to any form of casual weaponry. You fight them all individually in their own unique boss fights that each play out in their own different way. You first face Bella down in the dungeon, and you learn of the mechanic after accidentally breaking open a window in a cutscene. From there on out, you really don't have to do anything else except shoot her, but you can break open the other window for brownie points. After Bella's demise, Mommy gets really angry, and well, we'll get to her much later on. But the remaining 2 daughters you can fight in any order you want. I ended up going in the straight order and taking out Cassandra, then Daniela. For Cassandra's fight, you have to use a pipe bomb to blow open a hole in the wall after exposing it from moving a bookshelf. And for Daniela, you have to find the switch to open a skylight. When they are vulnerable, the girls don't really play around. They move much faster and are more aggressive. But Daniela, for some reason, seems to run and hide. I may not have told you all this yet, but by using guard, especially on boss enemies like these, you can easily make it more manageable and make it seem more like an actual struggle and fight, giving a few more points to the action of this game. A lot of people seem to complain about how brief your time in the castle with them is, but if you ask me, the castle itself is one of the more well-developed areas of this game. I mean, each of the unique areas in the village is developed as much as it possibly can be, but this happens to be one of the very few sections where there's a lot more going on than there is anywhere else. It's exactly where the survival horror element of Resident Evil starts to come into play. And if you're a first-time player like I was here in this footage, then you'll be spending plenty of time with Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters as you try and figure out all of this castle and its secrets. Plus, the fights themselves seem to last in fairly good length, since you don't entirely know what you're doing. After entering the castle for the very first time, they are the first people/creature you encounter here. After escaping the quarters of Dimitrescu, they'll find certain times and segments to come after you until you deal with them later on. At least with Cassandra, because she seems to patrol the whole main hall area like her mother. They each have their own unique and interesting personalities as well. The most interesting one happens to be Daniela, who is quite flirty and seems to suffer depression from what I heard about her. Her older sisters Cassandra and Bella, however, happen to be overly hungry for you. And not in a romantic way either. I don't think. Oh, and also my sympathies for the loss of Cassandra's voice actress, who passed away from cancer before the completion and release of this game. Finishing each of their encounters results in you getting a puzzle piece you'll need to escape the castle. There are even unique and hidden cutscenes that involve them depending on what you do. Like that whole conversation between Cassandra and Lady Dimitrescu only happens if you go to finish off Daniela first. And I think there's even one where Lady D freaks out about the loss of all of her daughters should you choose to kill Cassandra first.
No! How much blood and sweat do you think it took to raise those daughters?
Well guys, that's it for part 1. What do you think so far? Do y'all agree with my list? Stay tuned for part 2 coming real soon. Hope y'all enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one. Peace.